Thank you for coming. My name is Tyrone Jefferson, and this is the 7th and last program for Digging History Through Music and Dance.
Today, or this evening rather, we're going to continue our journey. And if you recall last week, we talked about truth being buried alive and muted for centuries. It's very important to understand that as we continue to go forward, because tonight what we're going to do is we're going to uncover and concentrate on those individuals who in our history started that process. And we would be remiss if we did not start with two individuals who had a hand in this process and who began the process of creating the literary art forms that ultimately would have a great bearing on how we as African Americans see ourselves. And let us start with Equiana Dallo and the beautiful and fragile Phyllis Wheatley. We're dealing with two different genres of literature in its inception. Phyllis, obviously poetry, and Equiano, slave narration. What's so beautiful about Phyllis? A lot of people don't know that she was a sickly and feeble young lady. And that sickness was attributed to her journey during the Middle Passage, which caused her to walk with a limp and caused one of her arms to be limp. Understand how people were packaged on the Middle Passage. You went months in a compartment that was less than 3 feet in height, and at best 4 to 6 feet in length. So she never did quite recuperate from this passage. But what was so beautiful about her was that as she grew into a human being, she developed a very beautiful art, and that was understanding the art of writing. Keep in mind that as she grew into her adulthood, African Americans during that period in time, as they learned to read and write, primarily the only book that they had for instruction was the Bible. So how did the Bible affect her poetic style? Her poetic style was called elegiac, which is 4-line or 3-line or 4-line quatrains that had its substance versed in verses from the Bible. So most of her poetry, not only did it have social ramifications, but it also did it within the context of biblical text. During this period in our history, it was not possible for an African American to write, let alone construct lines of poetry. Impossible. So, in order for Miss Wheatley to receive any degree of recognition, her slave master had to set up a conference with the powers that be in Boston, Massachusetts, to see who this person was, because we know that people of African descent do not have the mental prowess to conceive complex thoughts. So during this process, she had to prove to a panel of human beings who were flesh and blood, just like herself, that she was capable of this phenomenal feat. Think about that. I got to go before a panel to prove to you that I am capable of cognitive thought. How insulting. But she did it. But we have to understand why, because as we move forward, we have to understand how expiatory literature, to expiate means to denigrate, to debase, to dehumanize. Where did these thoughts of African people come from? If we go into the scholarly journals, if we go into the literary canons and the historical canons of the day, we will see in Notes of Virginia, written by none other than Thomas Jefferson, that African American people or African people were incapable of cognitive thought. Thomas Hume, Immanuel Kant, in notes on the humanitarian development of human beings, always placed African people at the bottom of the food chain. So these were literate people that taught other literate human beings how to perceive African people. So this was what Dear Sister Wheatley was up against, because it was being taught in the universities at that time. So in our recognition of literature, we always have to start with Phyllis Wheatley, because it was she who opened the doors for every single literary figure from that point forward.